Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Alphabetical Fugazi, the only podcast that devotes an episode each to discussing every song in the Fugazi catalog, from Fuga A to Fugazi. I'm your host, Ian James Wright. My inaugural guest here to discuss 23 Beats Off from 1993's In on the Kill Taker is the man who literally wrote the book on the album. It's from the popular 33 1/3 series from Bloomsbury Academic, and I think it's safe to say it's a revelatory look at the writing of and making of In on the Kill Taker. It draws on his own conversations with Fugazi and their collaborators, as well as access he got to demo versions the public has never heard, and other good stuff like that. He's also a journalist who covers culture for the Austin American Statesman, and I believe freelances elsewhere. Welcome to the show, Joe Gross.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad you could be my guest on this first episode, because every time I do an episode on a song from Kill Taker, I'll probably be pulling some tidbits from your book. So I'd like to thank you in advance for that.
Totally cool. Yeah, that's what it's there for.
Yeah. So let me just say one thing directly to our listeners here, if I could. If you are interested enough in Fugazi to have downloaded this podcast and to be listening to me speak right now, you should buy Joe's book. I don't care how big of a fan you are. If you don't come away from it without having learned a bunch of fascinating stuff you never knew before, I'll eat my hat, basically. So it's available.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah, it's available at discord.com, but probably also Amazon, probably wherever else you buy books, right?
Yeah, it's all over the place. A lot of independent bookstores carry it. A lot of record stores carry it. Amazon is fine, of course. Discord's got it. Yeah, you can find it all over the place.
It came out in 2018. Fugazi went on hiatus in 2002. You know, we've now been living in a post-Fugazi world for longer than the band was active. So basically, why now? Was there something that sparked it? I mean, I assume you've been carrying some latent interest in the album for a while, and at some point you just decided you wanted to write about this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're the band that I've sort of written about the most and followed the closest over the years. I've been, a fan or thinking about them since like 1988. And it's one of those records that I'd always thought about doing something larger on. When I approached the band, I didn't want to do the book unless the band was interested in doing interviews. And so I contacted them and said, look, I can do any one of your records. Do you have a preference? I'm happy to write about any of these. I know these records forwards and backwards, but are there particular ones that you don't particularly remember making or that you could speak to better than others? And they huddled, and when they got back to me, they said, you can write about whatever you like, and we're happy to talk about whatever you like. We remember Steady Diet the least, because that was sort of a weird time with us recording. But do whatever you want. And so I picked Kill Taker because it arrives at sort of this very interesting moment in American music about 2 years after Nirvana, them getting signed and them putting a record out on Geffen, and that record exploding sort of put a spotlight on this music that had been percolating in the American underground for 15 years at that point. And just suddenly it was everywhere all of a sudden. In the book, the guys talk about, leaving for Australia before that record got big. And as that record was getting big, they were touring Australia, and they were just like, what the fuck is going on? Who are all these, this band is suddenly everywhere, which I think is kind of a funny image. But Kill Taker comes out in 93. That's a really interesting moment in American underground music when major labels were signing everything in sight, and the SoundScan method of collecting data on sales was about 2 years old. And so for the first time, you got reasonably accurate charts regarding sales from all over the place. And what, Americans found out is we were listening to a lot more hip hop and country than we thought. And,
right.
Fugazi charted.
Yeah, that's really cool. I just asked because I was sort of asking myself that, like, why would I start this project now? It's something I think. One thing that's interesting too. Probably, I assume you've had a pretty big response to the book, like people getting in touch with you and telling you how much they enjoyed it. I feel like there's this this almost underground lingering fandom because, as you say, they were big enough to chart. So many people cared deeply about them. But there's this thing in the larger culture where, because they didn't sell any merchandise, you never see, either in person or like in movies or as set dressing or whatever, you never see any T-shirts, any posters that say Fugazi. So it's almost like if you weren't into them, you might not even know they exist, right? If you weren't into it at the time. But I feel like there's this fandom out there that still really cares about them and is really into them.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting thing that those records, I think still sell and do okay and are reasonable catalog pieces for Discord. But you're right in that there aren't. It's not like the Rolling Stones or something where they've been touring for 60, 70 years and there's 70 years. That's ridiculous.
That can't be right.
No, that's not correct. It's not like that. It's not like they had a long run. I mean, 15 years is pretty great for any band, but they've been, nobody died tragically. Nobody, there was no scandal. They just decided it was, good time to stop playing for various reasons, and and so, yeah, if you weren't there at the time, you're right. It's tough if there's no merchandise to sort of continue advertising a band after it's gone. You either sort of know about them or you don't. And I mean, I think those records are extraordinary, but they don't really do justice to the band playing live.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which is, how they, which was really their MO was their live shows.
Yeah, and of course, listeners, if you haven't checked out Fugazi Live series on Discord, just an absolutely incredible archive of live music. A lot of it's recorded really well, good quality, and they're pretty cheap. It's like $5 a show. So yeah, download a few of those.
Yeah, it's something else.
All right, well, yeah, let's jump in. We're talking about 23 beats off today. So, something I like about the alphanumerical format of this show is that it's going to force me to do interesting things like start with this song, which probably by any other metric would be a bonkers choice for the first song to discuss when you're talking about Fugazi's catalog, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
It's so as you said, the records backward and forward. Do you know what makes this a real outlier in their catalog?
Well, I think I don't believe it's a song they played live all that much. I need to double check that.
Yeah, very few times according to the data I've seen.
Yeah, I think it was sort of I think it was a kind of a tough song to execute live, and it didn't sort of pair well with other songs. I think it's interesting in that it is a reflection on the lives and deaths of two people, and is often mistaken for being a song about a third person entirely, which there are very specific reasons for, but I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, oh, by the way, I was referring to it is in fact the longest recorded song in the Fugazi catalog, 6 minutes and 41 seconds.
Yeah.
That's and it includes, of course, it's not unique in this, but it includes this long noise like feedback jam. Let's talk about the lyrics for a bit. So first of all, if people haven't read the lyrics somewhere, they might find it a little bit hard to decipher, right? It's one of the probably foremost examples of going from very quiet to pretty loud in the catalog, right? You can barely hear the first lyrics that come out. But right, a name, I recognize that name. It was at the center of some ticker tape parade, the lead story, a fine example. A name, it was at the center of some magnifying glass. He used to pretend he was fighting some war somewhere. Now everything depends on fighting some war. He never thought he'd be an exclamation point, a demonstration of his disease, a punctuation mark, a household name with HIV. Still, it's just still sound. I like, first of all, how it sort of saves up till the end, really, the topic of the song, and it drops that it's about somebody famous with HIV. Would you care to reveal what Ian MacKaye said about
totally.
who it's about?
Yeah, it's about Arthur Ashe and Freddie Mercury, and not, as many people believed, about Magic Johnson. I think a lot of people thought it was about Magic Johnson because it was written, it came out, the song came out, the song came out on an album well after Magic Johnson was sort of a known quantity as somebody who had HIV, but it was actually written before that. And it was written about the tennis legend Arthur Ashe and Freddie Mercury, the singer for Queen, and about sort of how they lived their lives and, the difference between, wanting fame, wanting to be famous, and then becoming famous for something that is quite private and, is extremely sad. When this song was written, HIV/AIDS was still an absolute death sentence.
Right.
And it's not anymore. And it's kind of a startling thing to think about in the context of that song and how old that song is.
Right. I guess the crisis very much coincided with the formative years of Fugazi and Ian. I don't know how old you are. I was born in 1982, and I remember, AIDS in elementary school. It was like a big deal. There was all kinds of sort of awareness things happening. But then, by the time I sort of became sexually active, it wasn't a huge concern anymore. So it's hard for me to understand directly. But from what I understand, at the time, it was terrifying to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no question. I was born in 1974, and I can tell you that it was something on people's minds, who were, even before they were sexually active. It was sort of this looming specter, and people kept getting sicker and sicker, and people on the margins of American society kept getting sicker and sicker, and it was presented as this disease that affected people who had done something wrong.
Right.
And, be they gay or an IV drug user or homeless, like it was very much a disease that spread among marginalized communities. And then, which is part of the reason that it took forever for people in American government to acknowledge that this was going on and this was a very, very serious problem. So when when Ian wrote that, when the band wrote that song and Ian wrote those lyrics, it was still, a disease associated with that had a moral panic component to it, undeserved, of course, but that people were like, that it was something that happened to people that weren't you or me, that's how people thought about it.
Yeah, I can only imagine too that, imagine what a huge setback to the gay rights movement and gay acceptance. Like, who knows how many years it set back the cause of, it must have been an enormous blow.
It's pretty horrible when a disease, spreads among a particular community and then just destroys it. It was, it was really, really horrible.
Yeah.
It was really horrible. And it's still pretty awful. But it's, if you are lucky enough to live someplace with access to antiretroviral drugs, it's something you can live with. But, that's a pretty small percentage of the population on Earth. So
that's true.
Still a lot of work to do.
The topic is pretty clear that it's about a person or people with that are famous with HIV. In a way, I don't know what you think about. Is it really important who it's about? It sort of strikes me as it could be about any famous person with HIV, and it is. And it's not super important who it was written about.
No, not really.
It's so the topic is kind of out front, even if it's not explicit about who inspired it. But I feel like the lyrics are a little shy about the point it's trying to make about a household name with HIV, right? Do you have an interpretation of that?
Well, I think that like a lot of stuff, like a lot of their songs, there's a lot of wiggle room for the listener to figure it out for themselves. I think there is, he's sort of pointing up, I think the writer, Ian in this case, is sort of pointing up the dichotomy between, that a quest to be a famous person. Arthur Ashe was a brilliant tennis player. Freddie Mercury was one of the most brilliant frontmen who ever lived. And then, to what extent do we owe somebody like that a modicum of privacy when their private life becomes, or when their medical life becomes public knowledge? And there's no particular reason you would remember this, but Freddie Mercury died like a day after announcing that he had HIV, that he had AIDS. His band kept it extremely quiet. I think the dichotomy is presented in the song is that, if you are somebody who is seeking a certain level of fame, then you sort of have to expect your life will be under a microscope, because that's just sort of what we do here. But to what extent do we need to, to what extent should that, magnifying glass be removed when something this personal happens? I think something that is sort of striking about Arthur Ashe and especially Freddie Mercury, Freddie Mercury kept it very quiet. And I mean, tabloids certainly knew, but there was no sense that like, hey, I'm going to be a public person with AIDS for either of them. And, on some level, that's too bad, because that could have, could have humanized the disease for a lot of people. On the other hand, that's none of our business. And, these people should be allowed to, mourn their health or deal with their health in private. And I think that's what the song is sort of getting at, that there's this weird thing that happens when somebody gets famous and then something really bad happens to them.
That's an interesting point, that it's sort of paradoxical that a celebrity, a famous person having HIV could make it more real, more relatable to the common person. This is not a faceless disease anymore. It affects people that you are aware of.
It affects people that you're a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Ashe was a brilliant tennis player and a groundbreaking person. And, Freddie Mercury had literally millions of fans. And, I think a lot of them were genuinely shocked when he died. I mean, some of them weren't, but a lot of them were, a lot of casual fans probably had no idea he was sick. I certainly didn't. I mean, I was a casual Queen fan. I think the other thing that's sort of should be noted is that, both Ian and Guy, and I think the rhythm section, Joe and Brendan, are all Queen fans,
right?
Especially Ian and Guy.
And
I think
it's good to note at this point that Fugazi, over the course of their history as a live band, they played a ton of benefit shows for AIDS-related issues, including like a gay rights march, an AIDS hospice, the ACT UP, which is AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. AIDS research. There's this interesting website. This guy Carney Clears, I think is how you pronounce his name. That's he has a website about it. Carniklirs.com/project/Fugazi. He did a lot of he scraped data from the Fugazi live series. Did a lot of interesting visualizations about things they did over the course of their career. He sort of broke down all the benefits the band played. and the money they raised. So he estimates they raised a total of like $19,000 just for these AIDS-related causes, which is
no question, and that's all in like $5 increments. Like it's not. It sounds like a small amount of money now, but it wasn't to, especially to places like the Whitman Walker Clinic in DC and places like that were treating AIDS patients who were indigent or who didn't have access to decent health care. Back when people were still, when some doctors and nurses were still very much afraid of them. It's a great piece of music.
Yeah, and before we depart from talking about the lyrics, I just wanted to see if you had an interpretation of the last line, which is "Still, it's just still sound." That's probably the most mysterious line to me. I think my best interpretation is, even when people are hearing about these famous household names who have HIV, to some extent, it's still just white noise in the background. It still doesn't impact them directly. They still don't have enough of a stake in it to actually do anything. Do you have a different take on that, or do you think I'm off?
No, I think that's pretty sound. That's pretty spot on. That it's Fugazi songs are very, for a band that people thought was very like prescriptive and said don't do this, don't do this, don't do that. I think I've always thought that was kind of ridiculous, and B, their songs are very open-ended. The vast majority of their catalog is very, the lyrics for almost all of their stuff are very open to interpretation. Mm-hmm. And I think you're spot on.
And not to mention, we haven't really talked about the title of this song, but this title is incredibly obtuse. You shed some light on it in your book. It's a title that makes sense if you know this other Fugazi song, 2 Beats Off, and if you've heard the Steve Albini demo, which was never publicly released, then you could figure it out yourself.
Yeah, the title's completely ridiculous. Fugazi would often just sort of like, what they told me for the book is that they would often sort of just assign random names to little pieces of songs they had on demo tapes, like Link Ray number 2 or Chunky Bits or Chimps or something like that. And so it wouldn't surprise me if somebody had a piece of a song that was like, oh, this sounds like 2 Beats Off. And, just sort of like kept that as a working title. And then the 23 Beats Off thing was an in-joke about doing 23 snare hits on the end feedbacky part, the little noise jam part. In the demo that Albini recorded, Brendan does hit his snare 23 times. But I think cooler heads prevailed after they that was kind of ridiculous, and but they kept the title, which has confused people ever since.
Yeah.
And it added to the confusion in that Magic Johnson's number was 32,
right?
And so they thought people thought that 23 Beats Off, they just flipped the numbers to hide it. It's like, no, that's actually not correct at all, but completely understandable that people might think that.
I'm sure there's a balance between them being a little frustrated by that and them getting a kick out of people sort of misinterpreting what they were putting out there.
I think so.
They're a band that I guess it's not part of the common perception of them, but they have pretty good senses of humor, I would say.
They're all, I found them all incredibly funny. And one of the things that you learn listening to the live sets is that Ian was actually very funny all the time on stage, but he's so dry,
right,
that people just wouldn't get it. And, so he has this reputation for being a humorless scold when all 4 guys in that band are pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to be in a band for 15 years with people like who didn't make me laugh. Like
God, no.
that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
So
the documentary instrument is sort of revealing there too for people who haven't like really listened to interviews with them, whatever. Or, I think
totally.
Like Brendan in particular seems like a hilarious guy to me.
He's a doll. He's a very charming guy.
To talk about the sonic qualities a little bit, the title is a little squirrely. The chords are a little squirrely too. It's one of these songs that's like it takes you a minute to find like what's the one chord in this, what's the tonic. The chords sort of dance around the tonal center in this weird way. The rhythm is a little weird. It's definitely not something you could dance to. It's like I think the time is 4/4 on the drums, but the chords are in this sort of strange offbeat way that you can't really get a solid grasp on. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that they didn't play it live much.
Yeah, maybe
it was this piece of music that came together in the studio in a really impressive way, but was kind of a pain to play live in that you have these gaps that it's just I mean, you're right. It's sort of an oddly structured song with these, crescendos and low points that I think, are just weird. I can see how they wouldn't work in the context of a show. Like, this, this, we've sort of ground our show to a halt with this, sort of mid-tempo to slow song that has kind of weird gaps that you could probably hear a lot of people talking over,
right?
And then this big jam that isn't really like the improvisational bits that they do when they're doing something like Shut the Door or Glue Man or Provisional live. It's sort of a different kind of animal.
So in terms of that feedback jam, that's it would be remiss not to talk about that at all. It's super interesting. Like I knew people in high school who were really into Sonic Youth. I liked Sonic Youth, but as far as the feedback jams, which I always did like, I got into that. But I always thought Fugazi, to my taste, they did it better. Something about it was more appealing to me when they did it.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have. I think the fact that Fugazi always operated to me. I would always think of like a very tight jazz band or a very tight funk band that they could riff on something and still keep you could dance to their massive jams,
right?
Which sometimes you couldn't really do to Sonic Youth, but that really wasn't their thing. But yeah, I think this is an interesting bit because they never really done anything like it before, and
at least on record, I guess.
I mean, I'm sorry, they never really done anything like it before on a record, and it's it's a pretty out there bit for people who are might only know the band through Waiting Room or something like that. This sort of like tight 250 sing along, and 23 Beats Off is definitely not that. And I think it's I'm glad it's there. I think it's a really interesting bit. I love Brendan's drumming during it. I think that's really interesting, and I think it's a great part of the song. I do think it's something they ended up doing a little bit better on a song like By You.
I was just going to say that. I prefer By You. Like, I love that jam. This one's not quite as like my favorite, but I still dig it. I always liked watching them execute this sort of stuff live too. Like I had just started, playing guitar in high school, and I watch how they would jam the headstocks of their guitars against their amps live. Like at least Ian did, to get that like feedback going. And God knows, I never really got a good handle on what else they were doing exactly. But they sort of have this preternatural way of like controlling feedback in a way that I never managed to do without just getting squealing sounds.
Ian Ian did it. The thing that's sort of interesting about Ian's setup in that band is it's his guitar into a Marshall, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like that, he doesn't use effects pedals. I think,
I think Guy uses like
Guy,
one distortion pedal,
one or
right?
two, yeah. And that was it. That
Yeah.
was everything. And they could sound, if there's a version of Provisional that first appeared on the International Pop Underground compilation, which is this big orange and black record from late 91, early 92, something like that. And it has the version of Provisional they did at the International Pop Underground Festival. And that is as noisy and bonkers as anything that was around then. It sounds like, Joe's amp sounds like it's taking on water. That's really the only way I can describe it. Which I totally buy, because I'm sure it was extremely sweaty in that theater and extremely hot. But it's really, if you've never heard that thing
I'm gonna have to ask you to send me a link to that, and maybe we'll put it in the show notes or something, because I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's an astonishing piece of music.
Well, that's awesome. So let me ask you to do another thing here, which is brings us to ratings.
Do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me?
Do you think I could prevail upon you if you had to give this song like a personal rating from 1 to 5 stars, let's say, just purely in the context of Fugazi songs, from like worst Fugazi song to best Fugazi song? What do you think you might give this?
Oh, man.
It's hard, right?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, there's only like a handful of Fugazi songs that I actively dislike, and this is definitely not one of them. I'm, in terms of like their whole catalog, I give it 3.5 or 4.
Oh, nice.
I think I think it's a really good song that, since it didn't get played live, and that's such an important part of how their songs work and an important part of their story, it's hard to say what the song could have been in a live setting. I really do like it,
Right.
and I think it's a fascinating song, but is it one that automatically pops into my head as like all-time favorite songs of theirs? No, but
Right.
I think it's a really strong, really interesting song.
Yeah, I think I'd say something similar for me personally. It's it's not one of those go-to songs you think of right away when you have a someone asks you like, hey, put together a Fugazi playlist for me. It's not my favorite noise jam. I'd probably give it 2.5 stars. It's what I think it is too, though. I think I liked it less before I heard the Albini demo, because while I love on the record version, the noise jam is really cool. But I think overall it's stronger up till that point on that demo. Would you agree with that?
I've never, it's been a little while since I've finished the book, and even longer since I listened to those demos. I've never been a huge fan of them. I'm a huge fan of Albini's work in bands and as a producer, and obviously I am a huge fan of Fugazi, but I agree with them 100% that those demos were not ready for prime. Like, those recordings were not ready for prime time.
Yeah,
and,
I would say that probably for all the other songs. For some reason, that one speaks to me a little more than the record version. Not sure what it is.
I should check it out.
Yeah.
I should check it out again. It's it's cool that it's there, in that that song was played so little live that there just aren't that many recordings of it, and so that's, I'm glad it's out there.
Same. Well, on that note, is there any final remarks you have about this song? If not, do you have any plugs? Where can listeners reach you online? Do you have any like some events or articles you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Twitter at Joe Gross, and excuse me. The vast majority of stuff I do for the Austin American-Statesman, which is the daily paper in Austin, Texas, can be found at austin360.com. That's where the vast majority of my stuff is. And it's not often about music in the Statesman. It's usually about film or books or television. And sometimes it's about music. But not tremendously often. That's kind of it at the moment. I mean, I'm pretty easily Googleable. There's stuff from Rolling Stone and Spin out there that people might enjoy. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Right on. Well, thanks again for taking out a chunk of your day to talk to me about this. It's a real pleasure having a conversation with you about a great band.
My pleasure, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, anytime. I hope I can have you back at some point.
Yeah, that'd be great.
As for me, you can reach me, listeners, at fugaziatoz@gmail.com. You can also join the Facebook group, The Alphabetical Fugazi, and, I'll post a link to this podcast episode, and you can chime in the comments with your 2 cents if you have anything that we missed that you'd like to bring up. And I hope you'll join me for the next episode when we'll be discussing And the Same. So until then, keep your eyes open.
This is my last picture.